My name is Patrick Werner. I'm from ChargePoint Technology in the UK. We are based close to Liverpool, and you can be lucky that I'm not from there, so that means you will actually be able to understand my accent. I'm personally living in Germany. I'm running the office there, which is also responsible for the Eastern European and the Turkish market. So I want to talk you today a little bit through what our company is, but I will keep the marketing part as short as we can, just so you have an idea about the company, and then we go more into containment and to what containment processes are within the OSD field. So before I go into details, I need 2 volunteers from the first row. Who had a coffee after lunch? Someone? With sugar or without? Okay, so I can trust you. So you take this one. Someone here? Then I will take you, because you're the closest. So you now each have a pack of sugar, and for the moment being, I would like you to just pass it through the lines, and you will see about halfway of the presentation why this is important. But please, hand it from side to side. By the way, I borrowed them from the Kempinski Hotel. We will give them back later on, so no problem. ChargePoint as a company, to go with the marketing part, is born in 1997, if you want. This was where we had the first development of a split valve, and the idea was basically came in conjunction with GSK. So GSK was looking for a way of transferring high potent substances into the processes without actually exposing their users. And there was, of course, ways to do that in the past. We will see some of these containment strategies later on. But there was a new way looked, and that is how the split valve actually was born. So the fields that we work in across the industry is basically all steps. So this can be from API manufacturing, intermediates, early chemical phases, up to, obviously, oral solid dosage, what we're talking about today. But it can be as well liquid fill finish. It can be sterile transfers. I will not go too much into detail on this today. But if your company also utilizes sterile processes, we are also working in that field and can do their sterile transfers in non-sterile areas, so basically C-class clean rooms. The companies we work with, again, I keep that also short. You will know all the logos. You will see some of them from the local market here. Basically, all of the top companies within the world are working with our solutions the one or the other way. So basically, in this, we have gained 3 fields of where we work with: the aseptic solutions that I said, the containment solutions, but also single-use technology. So we started with the split valve as the core technology and then built the portfolio around it. So we have nowadays single-use bags in a bright variety of use cases that we produce in our own clean rooms that we have in our facility. We have plastic rigid containers. We have stainless steel bottles and containers, all that work in conjunction with our equipment. So with that, you basically fill the fields of OEB transfers, maybe just some cost-efficient, hygienic control applications, or the sterile applications. So why is that all important? I think containment is one of the most growing fields within the pharmaceutical industry. Luckily, you had Mr. Mike Brown, who had the presentation earlier on. He already gave you a really good impression of what it is. And all the applications all around high potent substances are growing and growing. So the idea, of course, is to have lower quantities, higher potency for a better yield and a better commercial usage. In addition to that, you have obviously oncologies, you have regulatory changes, whether this is in the chemical side, so when you produce APIs, there's things like the REACH order that gives you new ways of how you have to handle certain chemicals, but also very classically in the regulatory GMP field. The way classically you have mitigated the risk from high potent APIs is through basically regular open hand-in with air systems, maybe local exhaust ventilations, going over two isolators, handling everything within the isolator, closed handling and isolators, or even robotics. The only thing that is always the critical point is, at some point, you need to open the system up. You need to introduce your product the one or the other way. And this is where basically ChargePoint with the split valves comes as a bit of a niche and an in-between. So basically, we can be on top or beneath any process. So when you think of a classical OSD process, you start at a dispensing isolator. The valve could be attached to the bottom. You don't need to bring your container or your bag into the process. It stays outside all the time. You can dispense your API into it. You go to the next step, which can be blending, milling, whatever your next process step is going to be. And you can reintroduce it like you see it here. So basically, the two systems come together as we see it in this animation. There's only one way to do it, so your users can't do it wrong. Everything is mechanically interlocked, so there's no wrongdoing. By the locking ring, you bring the two halves fully together, and then you transfer the product as you see it up here. The movement is now to reduce the amount of residue that could be on top of the disk, and then you fully unlock the system. So that way, you can bring your product into. This is representing the wiping procedure. Although it is a closed transfer, like with every make and break connection, there is a slight risk of residual, especially around the perimeter of the disk. While I'm talking, I just leave the animation running. So basically, in between the disk and the seat, there is a slight risk for residuals that get compacted. It is important to understand that compacted residuals are not a risk to you or your users, because what is compacted is not airborne. The problem is all the particles that get airborne and that you typically can't see. So this is what the wiping procedure is for, just to make sure all of that compacted residue is removed before you go on to the next process, or before you go with your bag, with your container, to the next process step. So out of these tasks, they have basically formed two product groups. So we call it the PharmaSafe and the PharmaSafe Pro. So the difference is that the PharmaSafe Pro has, in addition, an extraction system that it uses in order to capture potentially airborne particles. So the tricky bit of it is when you do a SME-PAC testing, which is from the ISPE given out recommendation of how to test containment systems, basically both equipments perform absolutely identical. So the question would be, what for the extra step, the extraction system? So typically what I say is, you can have all containment systems to achieve basically any value you want. The question is how robust and how repeatable do you make your process? And this is where the Pro valve and its extraction come into place. So this is why we have put them into the market in these categories. I've handed out the sugar, and I hope you have passed it around a bit. So actually, I borrowed a third one. Because the question is, these numbers that are used in containment, like OEB4, 1 to 10 micrograms, OEB5 down to 1 microgram, or even lower. All these are relatively abstract numbers, because what does that actually mean? So in order to emphasize this a bit, I want you to imagine now that one of these sugar packs that you have passed around, if I would take one of these packs and I would distribute it evenly in the room. This room, by the way, is 2,000 cubic meters about. So if I would spread that, what concentration do you think we would have? Imagine this is a high-potent API. Would we be good from an OEB4, OEB3, OEB2, or OEB1 perspective? So this is the question for the quiz today.
How many milligrams is the sugar?
Oh, so basically this is about 3 to 4 grams of sugar in a sachet like this.
3 to 4?
Yeah, 3 to 4 grams. Yeah. So if you would distribute that homogeneously in the room, what would be the concentration? I'll give you a moment to do the answering. You have the 4 multiple choices here. All right. Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. Now it's important to get it right. It's work safety. Okay. So what I said before, when you have the differences in the standard system, the pro system, obviously all of our systems are tested, and we get them tested by a third party that is independent. And when you do a SMEPAC test, you basically get always a table that looks somewhat similar to this, where you have basically all the individual readings from the samplers. So in accordance with the SMEPAC guide, you would typically have 5 samplers, 3 around the point of transfer, 1 at the user, and 1 in the background, which is basically your baseline monitoring. And in our reports, you will find then all of the readings over the full course of the task, because your task starts, let's say, with minute 1, and typically within SMEPAC, you consider 30 minutes of a task in order to have it performed. So obviously the time is a really important thing to consider with the contamination. So that triangle you've basically seen before with Mike from OnFab. So with our technology and what you have seen before also in the animation, we're sitting somewhat within both sections of administrative controls and engineering controls. So of course, the valve itself is an engineering control as such, but it's only as good as the operation all around it. So just to repeat, technically with an endless liner, you can achieve the same values, but maybe your user does it slightly different on a Monday morning than he does on a Wednesday afternoon or on a Friday afternoon when he wants to leave for the weekend. So this is where the necessity comes for engineering controls. With this, as said, we're basically in all different processes you could think of. So whether this is from dispensing, reactor chargings, millings, and such. All of the equipments that we provide can be either manual or they can be fully automated. So for example, when you have a larger OSD process, you work with blending volumes of, let's say, a cubic meter, maybe even more. You can do that all with the larger size systems of us and with automated systems. So basically, these will be then very familiar to all of you that work in OSD fields. So here's a view of how it would look like underneath an isolator. So you basically have your valve outside, you have the interface outside, so you don't even need to bring your container, your bag, into the isolator or into the controlled area. And here, the following ends of the process, even up to the point of coating equipment. One of the things that I wanted to introduce as well is, because we're getting more and more of these applications recently, is continuous blending processes. So here you see a picture from a company in Switzerland called giderek. So they make these continuous blending processes that go then directly over a hopper, over a blender, into compression machines. So also here, there's applications, so I said, basically anywhere where there is some step going in or out of a contained process. So slightly different to the take at OnFab, where you have your isolator that is a single-use concept, where you basically could dispose it after the process. What we need after any process is to wash the equipment down, because you won't need to remove the dust that is present within the container or at the passive. So only as long as there's dust, there's a risk for the users. So in order to do that, there's different ways. So you basically can dock your container, your bottle, to a wash active. You can have wash lenses. All of this can be automated. And it goes as far as introducing lenses directly into your equipments. I think this might even be a picture out of the market here, if I'm not mistaken. And all of that, as said, can be completely automated. So when you have a washing system within an IBC washer, even there the system can be used. So here your personnel don't have to do any manual intervention, so at no point in time you expose them to the risk. As I said before, and this is a bit the transfer from the rigid and reusable solutions, we have also single-use bags in our portfolio. They go from very simple bags like you see them here, over to more complicated or sophisticated designs with 2 entries, maybe a large opening in order to charge excipients into a process where you don't need that high level of containment, or even larger volumes where you bring within bags up to 200 liters of a volume in. One thing I want to mention is that with these single-use bags, we also have, when I go back to the previous slides, a single-use passive. So here the benefit of that is, of course, you don't have to wash anything after the process. So you dock it, you dispense your product into it, you bring the bag, no matter how large it is, to your next process step, dock it again, discharge it, and then you can scrap the whole thing. So you don't need to wash, you don't need to validate, so you save a lot of the hassle. Here you see another iteration, again with 2 ends and the single-use passive that I've mentioned before. It can be either clamped or it can be welded directly onto the bag, whatever is the concept you are going for in that. And as said, going from 1 liter basically up to 200 liters. If you don't want to spend so much on basically the disposable side of things, there's also rigid solutions from plastic, having a bit benefit because obviously the reduced weight is there. So the Puro Vaso line basically goes also from 1 liter containers up to 50 liter containers in a plastic solution. They can be in a translucent white, so you actually see the level that you have within the container, which can become very handy. But we also have black ones, which are majorly used for all the chemical applications where you have ATEX ratings, etc. With regards to ATEX ratings, whether this is gas or dust ATEX, the equipment is fully suitable and can be used also in zones 20, 21, 22, whatever you might have up in your OSD production. As you saw in the slide about the containment strategies, the most effective way for any containment is not an isolator, is not a split valve as such, but all overall removing the user from the operation all overall. So this is where robots come into place. So we're not producing robots, but we work with the company Sterile from Switzerland on this. The only small downside robots typically have is they can't handle too high weights. Or when they handle high weights, they become very large, very heavy, and very expensive. So the idea was here to have a lightweight solution so that the robot arm doesn't need to become too big, too heavy. So this arm works with what we call an end effector. So that grabs effectively the Puro Vaso bottle. It works with a single-use passive, and it can operate in minimal spaces without any user involvement. So, and ultimately, that is the best form of containment that you can have for your user. Where there's no user, there's no exposure. So here you see the example calculation. So those type of robot arm would work for 25 kgs, so that's not that much. And when you then have a stainless steel container and stainless steel equipment, then that weight is already used up. So with the solution of the Puro Vaso bottles, the single-use passives, and the end effector, effectively you can do that on a low weight basis. So here you see it in all the steps with the respective benefits. So you need almost no clearance because the robots can be taught in a very precise manner. You have complete control, you teach all the positions, the accuracy that comes with it, and you even can go up obviously to higher position transfer points when you're on top of a machine. So let's see if that works. Yeah, there we have that for the end also as a brief animation of how that works. So we have here that working in combination with an automated valve. So you see the actuators here You have a compensator at the bottom. So the compensator basically helps for the alignment and for the forces that would come up from a robot or from a lifting column. Actually, all of these processes, if that is of an interest for you, we have that robot in our facility in Liverpool. So if there's any trials you want to do, something that you want to see on this can be actually done and tested in our facility. And I have to say, there I am quite with what Miha just said before about the try before buy. So we're pretty much having a similar approach to this. So a lot of our customers actually try the equipment up front. They make their own tests, their own SME-pack measurements. So by that, you can be assured it works for your particular process. And it's also important because you get your users on board. Because I promise you, no matter what sophisticated system you're buying, if your users do not accept it, they will find a way to work around it, which is ultimately, unfortunately, not good for their health, but they will do it. So can really just recommend, if you have an application like this coming up, reach out, do trials. That's the best, so you know that your money is well spent, because ultimately it's about the protection of your users so they are safe. And just already as a small spoiler, afterwards, because you have all answered the question now about the sugar pack. So who thinks he knows or has the answer right about what containment we would have here if I spread this? Are we in an OEB 1, 2, 3, 4? What do you think? Anyone? You would be shocked, I have to say, because if that would be spread, these few grams, evenly in this room, we would have a concentration of 2,200 micrograms. So I think it's always important to imagine this. We speak about 1 to 10 micrograms. We speak about 1.1, all the fancy stuff, nano level performances. But this would be enough to have all of us highly contaminated just within this room. So I think it's always important to keep that in mind when you work with high potent APIs. This is ultimately what this is about. And luckily it was just sugar. Thank you very much.